All right. Yeah, this is a Patreon from Kev. We don't normally do things like this, but I have to say, of late, I've been well into old school Scottish crime. I love Blink, Ian Blink McDonald. He just makes me die. Paul Ferris, Arthur Thompson. I just listened to Kevin Dooley on Sean Atwood. Hilarious. He's hilarious. But yeah, I see Kev sent this. Scotland is wild, wild. I don't know how old this is, especially back in the day. I don't know about now, but back in the day, Scotland was wild. But yeah, the downfall of Scotland's most dangerous organised crime gang. Yeah, I'd have thought that would have been because Arthur Thompson is still called the Godfather of Glasgow. But yeah, I'd have thought he's probably the most, but I don't know whether this is new school. But yeah, anyway, it's OCG TV as well, the channel. But yeah, let's go.
January 20th, 2017. Glasgow, Scotland. In this cold night on the eastern outskirts of the city, two officers from Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit, OCCTU, were surveilling a silver Toyota Yaris in Church Street, Bayliston. The routine surveillance was part of Operation Escalade, a long-running investigation by Police Scotland since 2014 into the most prolific organised crime group in the country. The group was responsible for international drug trafficking, money laundering and illegal weapons, leading to a turnover of more than £100 million every year. And the breakthrough the investigators were desperately looking for, finally, was about to reveal itself. Mark Richardson, an Edinburgh-based drug kingpin and a major player in Scotland underworld, was about to appear around the silver Yaris. And little did the officers know, this chance encounter was going to change the entire course of their operation, and more shocking revelations were just about to begin. So tune in to the incredible story of Operation Escalade and the unimaginable downfall of Scotland's most sophisticated crime gang.
I have to say, it's impressive organised crime now. I understand like Mexico is a bit different in that because literally the cartels are stronger than the government. So, like I get that, but over here, it's kind of like it's way more impressive to be fair now than back in the day because back in the day you didn't have CCTV, nothing was digital. Do you know what I mean? Like there wasn't there was fingerprinting, but it wasn't DNA. Like yeah, you could. It really was like the Wild West, but now I think it's amazing that people can run an organized crime group that brings in 100 million a year to 2014, but basically today, do you know what I mean? The world was the same really. But yeah, crazy. In a way you think fair play. But yeah, let's go. Like the Kinahans as well.
January 20th, 2017. As part of the ongoing Operation Escalade, OCCTU was monitoring several properties and vehicles linked to the organised crime group. One of these vehicles was a silver Toyota Yaris parked in Church Street, Bayliston, on the eastern outskirts of Glasgow, when suddenly Mark Richardson, a major player in Scotland underworld, showed up around the vehicle. Investigators at first were taken by surprise. But this chance encounter was about to change everything. When finally OCCTU officers moved into the scene and apprehended Richardson, they quickly realised that he had the keys to the Toyota with him. And on the keychain there was a fob which did not appear to activate any alarm on the car. The detectives then discovered the fob was an activation key to a Bluetooth device located in the rear cluster light of the car. And when they activated the device, a metal plate on the car came up on a hydraulic ram and revealed a hidden compartment. This was the beginning of everything.
That's crazy.
After a thorough search within the compartment,
James
officers
Bond
found
criminals.
a 9mm Glock handgun that was loaded and contained Richardson's DNA on it. Also, officers realised that the compartment was hidden in such an elaborate way that on a random stop, there would have been next to no chance of finding it. Detectives knew they were onto something. Mark Richardson was arrested on the spot, and the arrest immediately set in motion a chain of events unravelling a vast criminal network. The following weeks, officers discovered several other sets of car keys, leading up to different remote locations in the city. One of the keys was labelled Annie, leading to an industrial unit on Croftside Avenue, in the Croftfoot area of South Glasgow. Another was for Westburn Farm Road, Cambuslang, and it was a key of the logistical hub that was believed to be the main workshop where the gang modified their £250,000 fleet of vehicles. Finally, by cross-referencing all the keys to their addresses linked to the organised crime group, investigators created their strategy of action. And now, it was time to act. On the 5th of February 2017, OCCTU first raided the lockup on Whittinghame Drive, Annesland in the West End of Glasgow. And this was going to be a jackpot. In Annesland, the first thing the OCCTU officers noticed was the unit was rented under a false name and was paid the monthly £500 fee up front and in cash. In the compound there was only one big shiny door with 2 strong padlocks on it, and the rest was filled with old rotten doors falling apart. The investigators had a key, and on it was written Annie, and luckily they were in Annie's land, and once they opened the padlocks, it was a jackpot. Inside, officers found 11 guns, all neatly packaged and labelled, including Glock pistols and Koch submachine gun and an N75 hand grenade.
Yeah, that's
The
terrible.
deadly storage of guns also gave the police a treasure of forensic evidence, and one of them, the DNA evidence on a Beretta
Silence.
discovered in the unit, would lead the investigation to the
In the UK anyway, you get caught with a gun, you are fucked. But if you got a grenade, automatically makes it terrorism, and a gun with a silencer, that is so nicked. Do you know what I mean? That is so nicked. Yeah, all because of one matey.
discovery
I was
of torture
fuming.
victim Robert Allen and the people who was responsible for this violence.
Hold on, what?
Robert Allen was forensic evidence, and one of them, the DNA evidence on a Beretta discovered in the unit, would lead the investigation to the discovery of torture victim Robert Allen and the people who was responsible for this violence. Robert Allen was a mid-level drug dealer who owed the organised crime group £30,000 debt around the time of April 2013. Allen, unable to pay his debt to the gang, then decided to flee Scotland and managed to stay off the gang's radar for 2 years. In March 2015, Allen returned to Barnsley, Yorkshire, but he was immediately tracked by the gang. David Sell, one of the crime group's high-level lieutenants, turned up to his door with 2 of his associates and mobsters, forced Allen into a car and then drove him to a desolate industrial unit in Fauldhouse, Midlothian. There, Sell and his associates started to torture Allen. The torture included Allen being whipped with a thick chain, smacked with a metal bar, and left him with a broken leg after he was battered with a 14-pound sledgehammer. Allen was then ordered to strip naked and was sprayed with bleach. And when the men were done with him, then a hooded Allen was taken to a rural spot in Stewartfield, East Kilbride, and was shot 3 times, twice in one knee and then the other, and he was dragged to the top of the hill and ordered to roll down. As his attackers then
Even
left,
imagine
members of the
rolling.
public came to his aid, and Allen somehow managed to survive this brutal torture. But the Beretta 9000 that was used to pistol whip him with left his DNA on the gun And almost 2 years later, the same gun now was about to tell his untold story to the Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit and identify his attackers. And all this was going to be possible thanks to the groundbreaking forensic technique developed for Operation Escalade. Beretta 9000 that was used to torture Robert Allen was only one of the haul of weapons recovered from the lockup in Annisland. The semi-automatic gun, which had been elaborately scrubbed clean by the organised crime group, was hidden in a specially engineered compartment of a Honda CR-V. The gang took meticulous steps to cover their tracks, but this time it was the use of another meticulous forensics technique which would lead to their downfall. On March 13, 2017, when the Beretta 9000 reached the Scottish crime campus in Gartcosh, North Lanarkshire, it was completely dismantled. Traditionally, forensic scientists were only able to swab the surface of a weapon in their efforts to obtain a forensic sample. That was until a leading ballistics expert in Gartcosh decided to start taking them apart in order to test them for further analysis. By stripping weapons down to their smallest components, forensic scientists in Gartcosh were able to trace and test the microscopic particles from skin to sweat which were previously hidden from the traditional DNA tests. And thanks to this elaborate new technique, experts of OCCTU managed to recover Roger Allen's DNA from a small blood sample that slipped into the chamber and the magazine of the weapon.
Crazy.
An arrest warrant was issued for David Snell and his associates. And almost a full year later after the crime, in 2016, David Snell was under arrest for his role in the torture of Robert Allen. The arrest of David Snell was a crucial part of the Operation Escalade, since it was the first of the upcoming blows that will lead to the downfall of Scotland's most sophisticated crime gang.
Yeah, they are crazy sophisticated.
After all the raids, new revelations and 6 arrests, the Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit of Scotland now had an intimate knowledge of the organised crime group and their elaborate methods to conceal their operations. It was now clear for them this was one of the most sophisticated major crime organisations in Scotland, and they knew they were up for a challenge. The group had deep connections and ties with criminal activities, not only in the UK, but all across Spain, Portugal, Belgium and Holland. Their cocaine operation was industrial in its scale, generating an estimated more than £2 million a week, and overall £100 million a year. They had access to a terrifying arsenal of weapons, vast quantities of drugs, and an extremely large amounts of dirty money. Moreover, they were sophisticated enough to go to remarkable lengths to conceal all these from authorities. To hide their guns, they rented warehouses with fake identities in remote locations. To transport and store their weapons, they built hidden compartments in their vehicles and kept them in heavily fortified lockups. But one of the most shocking revelations was that the gang used state-of-the-art counter-surveillance techniques and equipment to establish their secure network, in order to not be compromised by the authorities. They invested heavily in cutting-edge US anti-surveillance equipment, which enabled them to do technical sweeps of their cars and houses for surveillance devices. Ironically, their listening devices and other gadgets that detected illegal transmissions were only available to the elite Scottish law enforcement and high-level Scottish military. Their level of sophistication even made the detectives of the case question their technical capabilities, whether their methods were at risk of being detected by the gang itself. In one interesting case, one of the officers on the case reported that when they were following some of the gang members, officers were suspecting that they had the capability to jam the airwaves. He witnessed that sometimes there weren't any signals coming from their vehicles, but the officers could see that the mobsters were using their phones and other digital devices. This was such a key lesson for the investigators that before even the cases came out, Detective Chief Superintendent McLean, one of the leading detectives of the case, gave presentations at Scotland Yard about the urgent need of the law enforcement to investigate technology and become digitally enabled in order to level the playing field with these criminal groups. The investigation of the OCCTU also revealed that even though the masterminds behind the crime gang and their key lieutenants were believed to operate in the UK, Spain and Portugal, the main success of this elaborate operation relied on sourcing the cocaine directly from cartels in Colombia and Brazil. It was clear that the gang's reach was global. This crucial information was revealed to the investigators after the arrest of David Snell, when the mobsters admitted to travelling to Brazil himself in order to negotiate a deal of high-purity cocaine directly with the cartels and arrange their shipment to the UK through West Africa. This unexpected development caused the detectives of the OCCTU to seek out international collaborations with the DEA in the United States, the UK National Crime Agency, Europol and Interpol for surveillance access in South America, the UK and all across Europe. And with these newly formed partnerships, OCCTU now had a newly gained global reach in order to go after the real criminals abroad. But first, it was time to deal with the local ones. As the Operation Escalade got deeper and deeper, and many of its separate investigations started to combine, by the end of 2017, the meticulous work of OCCTU started to give its fruits. 9 high-level mobsters of the organised crime gang, including David Sell and Mark Richardson, were now in prison for their criminal activities. Their list of crimes included the merciless torture of a man to a huge arsenal of drugs and weapons found hidden in a car, possessing an illegal firearm and laundering money for the mob. In December 2017, finally, Scotland's most sophisticated gang had their day in court, and suddenly, organised crime now had a face. 9 of them. And among the 9, it was sentenced for a total of 87 years in prison. David Sell was given the biggest jail term of them all, with 15 years and 8 months in prison for his part in the abduction and brutal torture of Roger Allen. During the trial, the court heard Roger Allen and how he became a target of the gang after he could not pay a £30,000 drug debt. Allen said to the court how he fled Scotland when he was unable to pay this debt, but he was tracked in Barnsley, Yorkshire in March of 2015. David Sell and his armed associates confronted him, and he was then driven to a remote location in Fordhouse, Midlothian, only to be beaten and tortured. This torture included him being whipped with a thick chain, smacked with a metal bar, and left with a broken leg after he was battered with a 14-pound sledgehammer. Sell.
To be fair, yeah, that's a rat. Do you know what I mean? That really is. Not to promote what they done to him and that, and of course it's all bad, but if you borrow money off of drug dealers, you don't intend to pay it back, you go on the run, they then catch up with you, give you a beating for 1, owing them money, and then 2, taking a liberty and disappearing for years, and then you sit in the court and name them. But that's why you shouldn't do be in the drug business is, yeah, it's full of snakes basically. But I'm listening to the Freddie Foreman book, who was like basically Arthur Thompson, Godfather of Glasgow. Freddie Foreman was Godfather of London. But you see loads of times where in them days people just stood strong. Like he talk about shooting someone in the shoulder that done something. Like him and his mate bashed up these boys, and then one of them he got and held down and shot him in the shoulder. And he said, mate, he didn't rat on him. Yeah, quite like a few times Freddie Foreman done something to someone, person got nicked and they never grasped on him. But that's what I mean, you wanted to be part of that world. Now you owe them 30 grand. And do you know what I mean? You know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen when you borrowed it. They've got to pay that money. It's like you put yourself in that world, and then you stand up in court and testify. That is what a rat is to me. Like regular people, it's like different. You know what I mean? You're not a criminal, but if you put yourself in the criminal world and basically you mess up. Yeah. Anyway, hold on 2 secs. I need more coffee. Carry on. Let's go.
Also admitted in court of being involved in abducting and assaulting Alan, as well as endangering his life. Cell's associate in the torture, Barry O'Neill, pleaded guilty to taking part in a cocaine dealing and sentenced to 7 years and 4 months in prison. Next, prosecutors focused on the locked storage facilities and cars used by the crime group. These were about the concealing, packaging and transporting of cocaine, cash and firearms for the crime gang. These were the handiwork of Michael Bowman and Francis Mulligan, the electronics expert of the gang, who worked for the group and in doing so...
Shout out to him, because that car thing was genius. Because I know they were starting to do it on prisons, but the opposite way around, so they like can't use a phone from inside prison to get to the outside world. I don't know whether they've actually brought that in, but that car thing was amazing. The fact that the police are trying to pick up the signal of the phone, they can see him on the phone, but no signal. That's genius. Yeah, fair play to that fella.
Facilitated their criminal activities. Anthony Woods was also involved in these activities. Bowman and Mulligan were both sentenced to 8 years in prison, and Woods got 11 years and 1 month after he pled guilty to having roles in serious organised crime. Next stop was an investigation of a shooting that happened in September 2016 at the home of Robert Kelby, a local gangster from Ratho, Edinburgh. Gerard Doherty was sentenced after DNA evidence linked him to the scene, and he was sentenced to 10 years and 6 months for his part in the shooting. Then the prosecutors brought up the big guns. It was the discovery of the massive number of deadly firearms found in the lockup in Annisland, Glasgow in 2017. The guns, the drugs and the hidden compartments of the rear bumper of the Honda CR-V and Toyota Yaris, including Glocks, a Beretta, submachine guns, a grenade and bullets. Stephen McArdle was caught with a Glock at a house in Wislaw, North Lanarkshire, in August 2016. McArdle was sentenced to 7 years and 100 days in prison. Mark Richardson was arrested after a similar weapon, a Glock, was found hidden in the Toyota Yaris in Glasgow's Bayliston in January 2017. Richardson was hit with an 8-year, 9-month sentence in prison. Finally, an ex-Army war veteran turned gunrunner for the organised crime group, Martin Fitzsimmons, was locked up for 10.5 years for having a Glock as well as ammo and £36,000 of dirty money. The arrests of the 9 high-level mobsters were a huge blow in the fight against the organised crime group. The move was designed to tackle the country's most dangerous crime gang's ability to move and operate so freely in the UK. And now, with the local wholesalers facing lengthy terms in jail, the next phase of Operation Escalade was about to focus on the Godfathers, who were flooding the country with drugs, trafficking guns, settling scores, and laundering money for their international operations. It was time to go after the Gillespie brothers.
I've actually heard of them.
It was in March of 2015 that the world first officially heard of James and Barry Gillespie's name in the papers. It was the murder trial of Martin Toner, a local criminal from Pollokshaws, Glasgow, who went missing on the 30th of June 2004. Several weeks later, Toner's body was found in a farm field in Langbank, Renfrewshire. He was stabbed 12 times and his throat was cut. 2 men, Douglas Fleming and John MacDonald, were standing on trial for the murder, but the widow of Toner had other suspicions. When asked in court what she thought about her husband's death, Michelle Toner mentioned for the first time the brothers' name on the record, James and Barry Gillespie. She said the only feud Toner has ever had was with the Gillespie brothers. That's why I believe the Gillespies have something to do with his murder. But when further questioned if she had any evidence about her suspicions about the brothers' involvements in the crime, she replied, No, that was just speculation on my part. Michelle Toner further testified that, in May of 2002, James Gillespie walked into Toner residence and tried to shoot Martin Toner at point blank, but fortunately his gun jammed and he was not successful. She also said after the incident, she and Toner moved out from their Glasgow residence out of fear for their lives. These transcripts were from the court case of Martin Toner in 2015, his murder trial almost 11 years after his disappearance. This was also the last time the Gillespie brothers have ever been seen or heard from. Gillespies were originally from Rutherglen near Glasgow. One of the very few pieces of information you can find out about them was that they would call themselves property developers. But the truth was the brothers were hustlers. They started out their criminal careers as Rutherglen street dealers, and then when the opportunity presented itself, they formed their own gang and moved up their operations to importing guns and laundering money for the Scottish mob. And now, in March 2015, feeling the heat from the police Scotland, it is believed that the brothers fled the country, first to live in the Algarve, Portugal, and then to Brazil, where they used their connections to secure protection. By the end of 2017, James and Barry Gillespie were two of the most wanted men in Scotland for their role of flooding the country with large quantities of cocaine and guns, as well as directing organised crime and ordering assassinations throughout the UK and Europe. But despite the power of their connections, no one thing was clear. With the arrests of their associates and the UK, the dominoes were about to fall and the circle around them was closing. January 20.
That's how you know that they're proper as well, because you can't find anything. Anything you can find about them is, yeah, they're called property developers and they grew up in wherever that was. That's how you know someone's a serious gangster, is when you don't know who they are. Do you know what I mean? But like you're saying, they're in Brazil ordering hits in the UK. Yeah.
Glasgow, Scotland. After successfully convicting 9 high-level mobsters of the organised crime group in Scotland, and now with their new partnerships with DEA, the UK National Crime Agency, Europol and Interpol, OCCTU was now fully ready to after the real criminals in the organisation and to cut the head of the snake. And in 2019, they managed to form a team of more than 200 specialist police officers, including an elite team of Colombian detectives, DEA agents, local and international officers who joined the hunt to find the real bosses of the organised crime group, James and Barry Gillespie, or with the nickname they gave them, the Escobar Brothers. Gillespie brothers have already been accused of heading the most sophisticated and dangerous crime gang in Scotland. But now they were on the spotlight of every law enforcement agency in the world, and they were wanted internationally. The Escobar brothers were feeling the heat. And this immense international mobilization of the law enforcement immediately started to provide results. One of Scotland's most wanted fugitives and a high-level lieutenant of the Gillespie brothers, James White, was arrested in Brazil. White, whose nickname was the Don, was half naked when he was arrested and cuffed with pictures of him sitting on a chair in his shorts, helpless and defeated, were published all around the world. It was almost like a reminder for the Gillespie brothers of the things that were about to come. According to reports, the task force who arrested White also had the crucial intelligence that the Gillespie brothers were also on the scene, but when they arrived, they were only able to find White in the hotel room. White was being hunted for years by the Scottish authorities for his role of being involved in the import of illegal drugs to the UK between March 2015 and January 2017. White was arrested and later extradited to Scotland to face justice. It was also around this time, in January 2020, another associate of the Gillespie brothers, Christopher Hughes, was arrested in Turin, Italy. He was wanted for his involvement in the execution of Martin Koch, a Dutch criminal turned crime blogger who was detailing the activities of the organised crime group in his popular blog. Hughes was a trusted member of the crime gang.
That's mad. I've heard about that too. The blogger, the crime blogger. He weren't just a blogger either. He was a criminal too. Right? Yeah. They say that the crime blogger that got killed. That might be why I've heard of the Gillespie brothers. Hold on 2 secs. Because I have heard of them. But yeah, let's carry on.
By the Gillespie brothers, he was in touch with them during his role of luring Martin Koch to his execution. Hughes was found guilty on March 30th, 2020 and sentenced to 25 years in prison for his role in the assassination of Martin Koch. But the murder of Martin Koch did not solve any of the problems for the Gillespies. Their lieutenants were getting picked by the International Task Force one by one, and the circle around them was getting smaller and smaller. Suddenly, there was no place safe, and soon they were going to feel the pressure to the fullest. With the newly arrests of their trusted associates, James White and Christopher Hughes, and the decisive efforts of the International Task Force, dominoes were falling down one by one for the brothers. They were on everyone's list now. And as time passed by, several conflicting reports started to emerge about the Gillespie brothers, that they may have had a fallout with the local gangsters who were providing security for them in Fortaleza, Brazil, over their protection money. Other reports suggested the siblings were kidnapped for ransom. Some even suggested they'd become too dangerous to protect and they were executed by a Brazilian gang. Police Scotland reportedly told their families, who were concerned about the safety of the Gillespie brothers, that they may have come to harm while on the run in Brazil. But despite all that, no news had surfaced about the Gillespie brothers for a while, as if they were dropped off the radar in 2019 and they were being hunted by the authorities. But then, one day, on January 3rd, 2022, something unexpected happened. The National Crime Agency of the UK suddenly removed the Gillespie brothers from their most wanted list. They went on and said they believed that the Gillespie brothers may have died while they were on the run in Brazil. South American police later claimed that a Brazilian crime cartel that was shielding the brothers turned on them after Gillespies refused to comply with ever larger demands for protection money. And even though officially the Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit of Scotland is still appealing for anyone who has any information about the current whereabouts of James and Barry Gillespie to get in touch with them, they were almost certain about their conclusion on the possible deaths of the brothers. As of today, Operation Escalade is still ongoing and continues to target the most dangerous organised criminal groups in Scotland and around the world. Since its launch in 2014, the investigation helped the convictions of 42 criminals for serious offences, including being involved in organised crime, supply and possession of drugs, firearms offences and money laundering. 8 fugitives connected to the organised crime group were arrested on international warrants in Europe and South America and were extradited back to Scotland to face justice. 2 men, James and Barry Gillespie, remain at large and are still wanted by Police Scotland for their involvement in the group's activities. At least, that was their official statement. So this was the story of Operation Escalade and the downfall of Scotland's most sophisticated crime gang. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video...
Yeah, what do you reckon then? I mean, the gang might have done them, like, if they weren't paying. Do you know what I mean? You come from crazy ass Scotland and you go to crazier ass Brazil to hide out. But also, I mean, like, again, going back to the Freddie Foreman book, it was his gang that improved relations between, like, there was a thing passed to improve relations between Spanish police and UK police just to get the Foreman gang. But when they, like he said, the whole world mobilizes against you, like, and Brazil, like in Brazil, do you know what I mean? You've got just as much chance of the police doing you in, especially if they've been being nuisances in Brazil. But then it could have been the gang too, like the gang that's supporting them too. Like they said, they just become too hard to, yeah, too much to manage. Again, you go back to Freddie Foreman's book, like what he done with the Mad Axeman. What's his name? Frank Mitchell. His name Frank Mitchell. And Cray sprung him, but he was a lunatic. So yeah, Freddie Foreman killed him. It just became too much to look after. But yeah, I don't know. I'm surprised this hasn't become a bigger kind of story, because it typically is like the Essex Boys. The reason why that's like still so big news is that they don't really know who done it. I know what's his name, Holmes, and whoever got nicked for it, Mickey Steele and Jack Holmes, John Holmes. But yeah, no one actually thinks they done it. And it's always big news when there's a mystery involved. And the fact that, yeah, they took them off the most wanted list, but then it might just be a case of that you just don't hear nothing from them. And maybe the Brazilian police and that task force team went to the Brazilian gang that they knew was hiding them, and just said, "We can make your life hard work." I mean, to be fair, that's two possible things: either that task force done them in, or that gang did, or they're still at large. But if their whole criminal organisation has gone, they ain't going to be able to pay protection money. Yeah, it's a mystery. But that was good though. That was good. Yeah, good documentary. Yeah, good request. It was like Tyson when he requested the Evander Holyfield thing. It's just good to do things like this, just because it's like, yeah, I don't really do much crime. I suppose the most is like murders. Like we'd have done a couple of murder things, but yeah, yeah. They were crazy sophisticated, though, and you know that you're crazy sophisticated when the whole world, like I say, mobilises against you. But yeah, yeah, that was a good little doc. But yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.